Donald Trump's rape trial is starting in just a couple of weeks, and here's 3 reasons why I think it's a very strong case against him. My name is Lisa Bloom. I'm an attorney since 1986. I represent victims of discrimination, harassment, and abuse. I've represented hundreds of sexual assault victims over the years, and I still represent a lot. So I really understand this type of case, and I'm happy to analyze it for you. So what happened? There's a woman named Eugene Carroll. She's a longtime New York City writer. I used to know her a little bit back in the day, very well respected in her field. She wrote a column for Elle magazine for many years. And she alleges that in the mid-1990s, she met Donald Trump at Bergdorf Goodman. They both kind of recognized each other. They were both celebrities at the time. And he asked her to help him shop for somebody at Bergdorf Goodman, a prominent department store in New York. And she did. And she says he took her into a dressing room and sexually assaulted her, raped her in there. After a lot of twists and turns and the New York legislature amending the statute of limitations to give victims more time to sue, Eugene brought her case in New York, and it is now finally going to trial, hopefully as scheduled, in late April 2023. 3 reasons why it's a good case. Number 1, witnesses. The judge has allowed her to call Me Too witnesses, 2 women who had similar sexual assault experiences with Donald Trump. I've litigated cases like this, and Me Too witnesses are really important to jurors to help them understand the context. Also, she's allowed to call witnesses that she told at the time what happened. 2 women friends. They're going to come in and testify. Secondly, evidence. She's going to be allowed to bring in that Access Hollywood tape where Donald Trump said, if you're a star, you can grab them by the you-know-what. If you're a star, they'll let you do it. And that really shows intent, Eugene's attorneys are going to argue. And finally, he's really in a bind about whether to testify because this is a civil case for money damages, which means he can't take the 5th and have her be silent about it. If he chooses not to testify, her attorneys can comment on this in closing argument, and that's a big deal. They can also say, look, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the only evidence you have is her testimony and her witnesses and the Access Hollywood tape. He didn't take the stand to deny it. You're allowed to do that in a civil case. I don't think he will take the stand because I think he'll be a terrible witness, and his lawyers know that, and he knows that. So that'll be a big plus for her in the case. Let me tell you something. Eugene, who I think is 75 years old now, is a very brave woman going after Trump. She's endured a lot of hate, and she's made it this far, and I have faith in her to be a good witness. I will be watching this case closely. Let me know your thoughts below.
A woke Biden appeals court has rejected Trump's request to take a look again and overturn the Eugene Carroll verdict. This is about the politicization of our justice system, and you cannot trust it as long as it remains this way. Welcome to Doug in Exile. I'll explain all of the rules so that you'll understand exactly why this Eugene Carroll case happened. Trump is still not doomed by it, but let's take a look at this and I'll get you started on where to go. This is the Hill article. This is just from a few minutes ago, in fact. Appeals court rejects Trump's bid to overturn Eugene Carroll verdict. They have to say that with a straight face. Okay. Now, this is going to be, again, more marketing on our legal system. Where are you confident? Is it fair? Is it true? Or is it just politics? My argument has been all along, this whole case, all of this has been just politics with Eugene Carroll, in that they magically changed the statute of limitations on this thing. She didn't know the date of the assault. Like there's all this fishy stuff about it. A federal appeals court in an 8-2 vote, that's 10 of the appeals out of 13 total, 8-2 vote Friday declined President Trump's bid to rehear his appeal of a jury verdict finding him liable for abusing advice columnist Eugene Carroll, leaving the Supreme Court as Trump's only remaining pathway. And that might be the only way that he gets justice. You know, if you go to the highest court in the land and Trump still loses, then that's it. By every definition, that's all that anyone could have done for him. Now, a 3-judge panel on the 2nd U.S. Court of Appeals unanimously upheld the verdict last year. On Friday, the full active Second Circuit bench declined to disturb that decision over the dissent of 2 judges. The full active second bench would be 10 judges of the 13 total, so I guess 3 of them are inactive. I'll explain the makeup of the court in just a minute. I'm just trying to get through some of this article. Quote, simply by relitigating a case is not an appropriate use of the en banc procedure. En banc means full court. U.S. Circuit Judge Myrna Perez wrote, joined by 3 of her colleagues, all of whom were appointed by former President Biden. That's all I need to know. I mean, it doesn't go much farther than that. Everyone's got to pretend like it's a straight face, like this is how justice works. Is this justice? Are you kidding? Quote, in those rare instances in which a case warrants our collective consideration, the entire en banc panel, it is almost always because it involves a question of exceptional importance or a conflict between the panel's opinion and appellate precedent, Perez said. In 2023, a New York jury found Trump liable for abusing Carroll in a Manhattan department.
A federal appeals court has denied Donald Trump's latest effort to overturn a $5 million civil judgment in the case brought by writer Eugene Carroll. In 2023, a Manhattan jury found Trump liable for battery and defamation, concluding that he sexually assaulted Carroll in the 1990s and later smeared her character when denying her claims publicly. Trump had asked the full U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit to rehear the case after the 3-judge panel upheld the verdict. On Friday, that request was denied without explanation, as is typical for such rulings. 3 judges issued a concurring opinion stating that they found no manifest error by the district court, but Judge Stephen Menashe, a Trump appointee, dissented, arguing that Trump should have been allowed to argue he acted without malice because he believed Carroll's lawsuit was politically motivated. Carroll's attorney, Roberta Kaplan, said her client was very pleased with the outcome, adding that Trump's repeated attempts to overturn the findings of 2 separate juries have now failed. Trump still faces an appeal of a separate $83 million defamation judgment in a related case. For now, the courts have reaffirmed the U.S. president remains liable for sexual assault and defamation.
Closing arguments in the Eugene Carroll case were today, and it is not sounding great for Trump.
And in his own deposition, his arguments collide, right? She's not my type. Oh, but I can't tell her apart from the second woman I married and reproduced with. And what are you talking about? When you're famous, they let you do exactly what I did to Eugene Carroll.
And the whole defense itself is flawed, right? I mean, Eugene is not the first alleged
26.
victim. Right, exactly. And so there have been many women before her who have come forward. And in fact, the Trump base does not find that to be, and even the evangelicals do not vote against Trump on that. So the idea that somehow Eugene was trying to destroy Trump and had cooked up a solution, this is clearly not the way to destroy Trump. I would say that I think that seeing Tacopino bully a 79-year-old woman who is doing this because she wants to clear her name is a pretty bad look. And it's hard for me to imagine that jurors are going to feel like she's some kind of criminal mastermind.
Breaking news in Donald Trump's defamation and essay case with Eugene Carroll. A 3-judge U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals has ruled that the $5 million judgment and essay liability will stand. And if you'll remember, Trump's arguments in this appeal were that the judge allowed testimony in from 2 women that were accusing him of essay also, who never filed a police report or ever said anything about it prior to going to court. One of them was from the 70s. She said it happened on an airplane. She couldn't remember where the flight took off from. She just knew that it was on an airplane in first class headed to New York City. One of the other arguments Trump was making was that the Access Hollywood tape should have never been allowed in. And this panel of judges apparently thinks that those 2 women and that tape should have been allowed into evidence, and they're allowing it to stand. He is still going to continue to appeal the big defamation ruling. That's a separate ruling. So this is just the $5 million judgment and the SA liability. A Trump spokesperson said in a statement that Americans demand an immediate end to the political weaponization of our justice system and a swift dismissal of all the witch hunts, including the Democrat-funded Carroll hoax, which will continue to be appealed. And remember, Eugene Carroll's attorney, the reason this all started to begin with is she was at a party. They called it the, We Hate Trump party or something like that. Kathy Griffin was in attendance. There were a lot of people that are very well-known opponents of Donald Trump. And she ran into George Conway, and George Conway convinced her to sue Donald Trump, and the next day had her in touch with an attorney, and a lawsuit was filed. And then whenever the Adult Survivors Act came out on November 24th of 2022, Eugene Carroll was the very first person to file where you could sue your abuser as an adult, regardless of how long it had been. And she was the very first person to file under the Adult Survivors Act in New York once it went into effect. And that act was only good for 1 year. So we'll follow this case and see where it goes. He can still appeal this one to the Supreme Court, or all the way to the Supreme Court. They are still waiting to hear on the ruling on the appeals for the huge money judgment for the giant defamation case. They were two separate things. There's Eugene Carroll 1 and Eugene Carroll 2. So just follow along, and I might make a part 2 and go over the evidence and things so that you know what it is that the jury was able to hear. But I have a list a mile long of videos I need to make, so I'm going to get on that. Make sure you hit the follow button. Make sure you like, comment, save, and repost, and turn on your notifications so you'll see whenever I post a video or whenever I'm live.
It's Joe from Georgia. Sometimes you just got to wonder, does Donald Trump ever get tired of losing? Well, today, in the Second Circuit of the United States Appeals Court, Donald Trump was handed another loss. This loss is about his defamation suit that Eugene Carroll brought against him. Now, he lost this case couple of years ago, and he keeps appealing it. Well, the next step would only be the Supreme Court of the United States. Now, he could ask for them to look at it, but the Supreme Court doesn't have to. Now, this all comes down to when Eugene Carroll came forward and said that Donald Trump had assaulted her and raped her. Well, he was found guilty of that by a civil court and owes Eugene Carroll millions, tens of millions of dollars. And he's trying to get out of paying it. But like I said, his next step would be the United States Supreme Court. And the thing is, when they don't hear that case, that will be the end of this for Donald Trump. Donald Trump was found guilty, and he's expected to be paying for this crime.
Huge blow to Donald Trump this morning, Friday. It's June 13th, Friday the 13th, and a court has handed Trump a huge blow. I was just checking out the Daily Beast in the Eugene Carroll sex abuse case. Remember that? A federal appeals court has rejected President Donald Trump's request to rehear a jury verdict in favor of Eugene Carroll. So it's a done deal. The decision solidifies a judge's earlier decision, according to the Daily Beast, that upheld his liability for sexually abusing and defaming the advice columnist, Eugene Carroll. Now, the only thing Trump can do is take this all the way to the Supreme Court, but they usually don't take cases like this. It's and she's going to get millions and millions of dollars from Trump, and he's going to have to pay that very soon. So he has declined So it was the Second U.S. Court of Appeals in Manhattan, and they declined to reconsider its December 30th ruling, which affirmed that Trump was responsible for both the sexual assault and resulting defamation of character. In case you didn't remember, journalist Eugene Carroll alleged that the then businessman, Donald Trump, sexually abused her in a Manhattan department store in the mid-90s. The $5 million award stems from a May 2023 civil court verdict. And Trump has also appealed a separate $83.3 million defamation judgment from January 2024. So all told, he's going to have to spend a lot of money. He's going to need a lot of Bitcoin. Of course, the whole time Trump denies ever having met her, didn't know her, but meanwhile, he's been found guilty by all these courts and judges. So Donald Trump remains liable for sexual assault and defamation.
Thank you for watching Great Minds Blacks.